Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, December 18th. Skipped yesterday, just whatever, got groceries and edited after work. Boring. Today, not boring. Today, I took a vacation time, just an hour, which I've never done, but it felt good to have something to look forward to all day. But I just took off an hour early from work so that I could go to the movies and see A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I've been kind of putting off, there's a couple movies I want to see, but amongst them is one that comes out this Friday, the new Star Wars. However, because it's a big one, when it comes out, all of the smaller movies go away. And so basically, I looked at the upcoming schedule. I'm like, if I want to go see this movie while it's in theaters, I go today, tomorrow, or I've missed my opportunity. So, like I said, took an hour of vacation time, and I'm going to go see it today. Actually heading there straight from work. Took off early so that I'd be able to make the matinee, since it's a Wednesday, so it's full price, but at least a couple bucks off at the matinee price. And also I'll get out of it with plenty of time in the day where I'm not stressed out. And so I'm going to go see that, and then I'll be discussing it, telling you what I think. That'll include spoiling it, for those of you that don't want it spoiled. But thank you for watching. See you tomorrow. But otherwise, yeah. Heading up to the theater, and I'll be telling you what I think in a moment. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood was quite a wonderful film. I really enjoyed it. Like an episode of Mr. Rogers for adults. Basically, that's what it was. It's a feature-length episode of Mr. Rogers for adults. That's what that was. 4 out of 5. And don't discount it. That's good. The way I review films, it's really good. 4 out of 5, but really good. Tom Hanks is wonderful. Just his ability to play. I mean, I loved him as Walt Disney, and then I was like, he's playing Mr. Rogers as well? Sure. Just play all of my childhood heroes. Whatever. Why not? But he does good. He seems to take a role and care about the role. Care about the portrayal of the character. He felt like real heart. And just they began the movie like an episode of Mr. Rogers, you know. He got the miniatures and the piano, just that piano. And he's singing his song, "It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?" And it just sort of goes, and my brain first turns on to, oh, they're setting it up with one of the episodes. But things seem off. This isn't a real episode. It's a new episode. It is, in fact, that the movie is a new episode of Mr. Rogers. And then we go into Lloyd Vogel's story, which is the main character of this movie. Lloyd Vogel. He's the one who's struggling with forgiving his father for leaving him and his sister when his mother died as a child. I told you there'd be spoilers. And that's he's struggling to get through that, as his father is now sick and dying, and he has a infant son himself. And all through this, he's doing a magazine article on heroes, and he was assigned Fred Rogers. And it seems as much as he tries to interview Fred, that Mr. Rogers is peeking behind the curtain and getting to know him and caring about him and praying for Mr. Vogel and his wife and his son, his father, and every little aspect of his life that Mr. Rogers learns about, he cares about. I love they didn't shy away from prayer and his faith. It's definitely something Mr. Rogers had a lot of. And he cared. He had patience. He took time to be interested in things that were important to those around him. I don't know. They portrayed Mr. Rogers, I mean, well. You know, they portrayed his heart and how much he cared, but they also talked at times about how, you know, he's not perfect, about how the things he struggled with. And it was more of a choice of how to deal with those. We all have that choice. I always have that choice. He chose correctly often, I guess. I don't know. Obviously, this is another portrayal, just as him, as we saw in the show, was a portrayal. And, well, it came across that that's who he was. Whether or not that's true, I believe it is. And I look up to it. Ultimately, in the movie, there's movie things other than just, I love the character, and Lloyd Vogel's story was really just a story to tie things together, a plot to follow, based on, you know, loosely tied to some real events, loosely, but it was a story through which Fred Rogers can come back and give us a new bit of advice, I suppose. But through it, we got to see things. They used the miniatures throughout the film to set locations and such, and it was just amazing. And then they had the puppets. Oh, those puppets! I remember those puppets. I loved those puppets. They even bring up the idea, you know, why don't you, you know, get new ones? Didn't you have? I think he called it a special friend, but, you know, a stuffed animal, a toy that you loved as a child, and it didn't matter how old and ragged it got. And I did. I absolutely did. And it's the same thing. It's like, it doesn't matter that the puppets were old and worn. It was more important that they were the same puppets. Yeah, they got messed up and torn. Well, you repaired them. They were the same because you cared about them. That was great. And some of the screens went into full screen mode. Like, it just had black bars on the side, and there was like a filter, like that. It looked like the old film stock, the old video stock, the old whatever it was. It looked like an episode of Mr. Rogers at times. And then it would go wide, and it would tell our actual story, and then we'd go back. And I don't know. It grabbed a hold of my heart, made me want to be a better person. And then they ended, and the credits go, and then there's a bit of credits, and then you hear a little bit of singing again. And it's different than the Mr. Rogers voice we've heard throughout the entire movie. I'm like, no, I know that one. I know that voice. And they have shots of some of the miniatures being set up, and then it winds out, and it's Fred. It's Fred Rogers himself. Just for a moment, but a glimpse. to show him in there. And I'm glad they did that. They ended on the Rio Fred Rogers. It was good. It was really good. I don't know. So, almost 6, so it's not really late. Feels late because it's dark out, but whatever. I'm glad I took the time to go see a movie. I'm glad I went and saw that movie while it's still in theaters. It was good. I grew up on Mr. Rogers. And there was a line in there. I think it's a line in one of the songs. The very same people who are sad sometimes. The very same people that are glad sometimes. And I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. But that wasn't the line I knew. That wasn't the line I grew up. And my mom would repeat to me my whole life. Like, it's probably been less than a year or so since she's last repeated it. And it's last had impact. The very same people who are good sometimes are the very same people who are bad sometimes. That was it. That was the line. About being able to see the good in everyone. Just because I can tend to have a very polarizing view and just in general, I am optimistic. I like to just pretend everyone is good and there are no problems in the world. And trust and hope, and it'll all work out. That is my general outlook. If I meet someone and through that process they are disproving themselves from that, I'd have, growing up, a strict tendency to say, well, then they're a terrible person. There is no light in them. And write them off. What's the point? So one way or another, it's a very polarized view. That was a line that my mom would often bring up growing up, trying to get me to realize, sort of just because someone does one bad thing doesn't mean they're a bad person. Just because this one situation, this one time, doesn't mean that that's who they are. Say, very same people who are good sometimes are the very same people who are bad sometimes. And I don't know how well I do at this point in my life at seeing it when I run into it. I can only ever really look back and see it. But I do know, and I can look back. And at the very least I know that, I guess maybe partially from that and partially just my mother and as I've grown, one of the things that I like about myself, one of the strengths that I recognize, at least when helping other people, is being able to take a step back and examine situations that they're going through and help them see other perspectives. I never really tied that to that line until this point, but I mean, I definitely have heard that line over and over, and just sort of the idea of someone's dealing with something and someone is just treating them so terribly and just being able to look at it and try and turn it. Like, someone, I've had times even with my mother, well, she'll get a text message and she'll read it out and about how terrible it is, whatever's been said, and just sort of go, well, it's a text message. Let's read it with this other tone of voice. Maybe it's not so terrible. Maybe it's not the way they intended it. I don't know. I suppose a point of growth in my life. And maybe it has something to do with him. With Fred Rogers. Anyways, I've been rambling here about it long enough. Best go home. Cook up some dinner. Will you join me for that? And I said it was a episode of Mr. Rogers for adults, but I don't think I mentioned the message. It's on forgiveness. That's an important message to revisit at various points in life. So when I got groceries yesterday, I got some vegetables. Those are vegetables I get for a very special reason. I make fried rice. I'm going to do that here in a minute. I ran out of chili, and I've liked having something to take with me to work, rather than having to just have a cup of noodles. So I'm going to make that. And I mixed some of that chili oil in with the normal vegetable oil. Maybe a little more heat. Nearly hot enough. And I got some rice. It's been a while. There have been times where I'll make it, and I mean, there's a good chance I'll make it again soon. Because when I buy the vegetables for it, I have enough vegetables to make it a couple times, really. 2, maybe 3, if I do it quick enough before things go bad. But, yeah, so I have dinner, and that'll finish out my lunches for the week at least, so I do appreciate that. That was just a real small splash of that chili oil. My mouth's on fire. I mean, I love it. But it burns when I breathe. Laughing can hurt when that happens. But that was good. That was good. Definitely might want to tone back on the crushed red pepper when I'm adding the chili oil. But it adds a different kind of spice. It's not the same kind of spice as the crushed red pepper. I like the variety. It's tingly. It's a tingly kind of spice. And I got things packed up for lunch tomorrow. So I got a vlog put up, which thankfully I'd edited one yesterday for today because I didn't have time to do so. But I'm glad I took the time. I went and saw a movie. I very much enjoyed it. It was encouraging and time well spent. But I'm gonna head to bed here. It's still freezing out today, but it's supposed to warm up tomorrow, so I look forward to getting to that finally. It's been cold long enough. Look forward to things melting. But yeah, so heading to bed. Thank you for joining me. Join me as my journey continues. Bye.